I was giving myself an oil job.
The Lord Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube, is a Red 5 show, also affiliated with Fandom Collective. So, enjoy the show, and the Force will be with you very soon on the Lord Be With You podcast show. Welcome to the Lord Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube. Just a big thank you to all of you who are supporting the show. I know that there are quite a few new fans in North America, in the USA, who have started watching and following the Lord Be With You podcast show on Podcast Player. So hello, howdy, and welcome. And there's lots of episodes on here on the on your Podcast Player, and also on Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube. There are episodes of me streaming Star Wars games and Battlefront 1 and 2, and in the new year I'll be streaming Marvel games as well. And so if you're listening to the show via Podcast Player, get onto Christian Fandom Geek, and you can enjoy some episodes of me talking about fandom and the geek world and playing Star Wars. So and I will be streaming episodes with the collaborators in the new year as well on StreamYard. So there's a lot of exciting things in the new year for the Lord Be With You podcast show and Christian Fandom Geek. And so have a lot of fun on here as well. And I've got for you now a remastered episode with Steven Harper for which is Forbidden Planet. It wasn't a previous episode on the Podcast Player, but I wanted to do it a little bit more sophisticated, and I hope you enjoy this new version of the episode, and we'll be with you right now on the Lord Be With You podcast show.
Welcome to Altair 4, gentlemen.
Welcome to the Lord Be With You podcast show. I'm your host, Asley. Today we're talking about a very interesting science fiction film indeed called Forbidden Planet. And I'm with a friend of mine who is originally from Birmingham and is now living in the States. And so Steve Harper.
Hello.
Stephen Harper. How are you?
I'm good.
And tell us, why are you living in the States when you're originally from Birmingham?
I mean, the easy answer would be the weather, but it's not the weather. I live in Miami, by the way. I should have said that before I said the weather. So, yeah, I think, what's it been now? 2 years since we moved. Obviously, Birmingham, born and bred, lived there all my life until 2. And, me and my wife moved. My wife's American. So she moved over to the UK when we got married, and then we've been together for, I think it's just turned 7 years now, which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we've been together, married that whole time, obviously. And then essentially what happened, I'm a Christian and worked for a Christian ministry in the UK. We made... I'm trying to think of the easiest way of saying this. We made short films of people's testimonies, of people's life stories and experiences with God, which was awesome because, you know, I'm on a podcast with you talking about film. Clearly, I have that love for filming as well as a love for faith and for God. So I was doing that for about 6 years, and then within that time got married, and then towards the end of my time, I really just felt called by God to move to America to start a church here. And the last 2 years of that process, because it's not, I think a lot of people think that when you're called by God to do something, it just happens immediately, and that's not the case.
Yeah, like magic or something.
it's a process, because we're human, right? We're not perfect. We have to figure things out, and we have to,
of course,
we go where we feel God guiding us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we know the path and exactly where it's going to take us. So there's a lot of like via destinations on the way.
Good. Okay, let's spin the wheels now and get you thinking towards more the science fiction genre, which obviously, I think it's fair to say Forbidden Planet is a science fiction movie.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
But in terms of science fiction, before we get to Forbidden Planet, what got you into science fiction per se? Because I know you're a big fan of the science fiction genre.
Let me just do a quick run through of what this list is. I'm going to be real quick with this.
Yeah.
I made a movie list because I'm a nerd and I love movies. And I think I always just wondered people always ask when you've got a big movie collection, what's your favorite movie? And I could never answer because I was like, I genuinely don't know what I would like consider my favorite movie. I've not studied it. I haven't really looked in enough depth. I know my top 10 or whatever, but I couldn't tell you which one was my ultimate favorite. So I made a list and I created a bunch of different sections that I would rate a movie, and then that gives me an overall rating out of 10. So I've got the story, entertainment value, realism, and direction. Those are like the 4 areas of a movie that I review. And then I've done it so that each value is 25. It's out of 25 for each score. And then that adds up to 100. You divide it, and then it gives you an overall score out of 10. So, I think it's pretty simple, but it's effective because now I can tell you what my favorite movies are. Within there, I have like the lead actor, second lead actor, supporting actor. I have the genre and then the director. So I try and keep it simple.
Give me your top 3 science fiction. Just not going into the films really, but just your top 3 science fiction movies.
All right, let's have a look at this then. I imagine off the top of my head, it's going to be Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. That's going to be one of them. Okay. It's definitely The War for the Planet of the Apes is one of the new trilogy, the newest trilogy that came out for the Planet of the Apes. I have just fallen in love with that story. I can't tell you how incredibly well done that whole story arc is, and there's a reason that the fan base has been demanding a second trilogy, which I don't even know if they're going to do, but honestly, Andy Serkis is one of the most gifted actors when it comes to mocap and CGI. He's just a fantastic actor.
We are back with the Lord Be With You podcast show part 2. And we've covered a little bit of ground, and we're going to focus in now on really some of the plot lines of Forbidden Planet, but without... I mean, there will be some spoilers a little bit, but we won't fully spoiler the whole thing. We actually want you to go and watch
Try not to.
Okay, so next question, Steve. What do you make of the look and style of the film?
Do you know what? I think I started making notes when I started watching it. I was like, I need to make some notes here because my memory's so bad that I'll often have a thought and then just forget about it completely until I have the same thought after watching it for like the 10th time in about 10 years' time. My initial thoughts were, I can't believe I'm watching a movie that was made in the 50s. I think that was that was the biggest shock factor for me, was that everything I was watching, I was just really like, I just felt great watching it. It was like, this is incredibly awesome movie. Firstly, it was in color, which was a nice surprise, because not that I'm against black and white movies or anything, but I just prefer movies in color. I just think you get more of the visual experience that the director is intending you to get. And it was shown when there was a line at the beginning of the movie where they talk about the guy comes off of the spaceship, the two of them, the commander and his sort of second in command, and he's like, look at the sky, that's such a beautiful color. The other guy's like, I prefer blue, which was really funny that he was like, actually I hate it here kind of thing. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
if this had been a black and white movie, I don't even know if they would have included the line, because you wouldn't have had the visual to support the line.
Yeah, of course.
So visually I thought it was really good. It was a studio recorded movie. You could definitely tell that, because essentially there were 3 cuts. There were 3 camera angles for every scene, if you notice. And that's like a stereotypical studio filmed production, because they can't show you behind the actors because there's a studio there. with all the cameras. Yeah. Whereas in modern movies nowadays, when it's filmed live in location on set, you've got a 360 studio to film in. So essentially you can show all angles of the actors, and there's never the studio setup to be shown. So you can always tell when that happens. And also the lights reflecting off of when they got in the car with Robbie, the robot, at the very beginning, you could just see the lights reflecting. The studio lights were reflecting off of like the windscreen, which was hilarious. But
that is funny.
Forgivable when it's the 50s when this is being filmed. I love the attention to detail as well. Not that it's a sci-fi movie, right? So you know that it's not accurate because you don't know what the future is going to look like. You don't know about other worlds and how that'll appear. But when people take it seriously, like this movie does, it's very easy to get lost into the story because you feel like the world that's being presented to you is real. And that only happens when detail is presented in its entirety. If you miss the nuances, like even their weapons, everything about their weapons looked futuristic. Their outfits looked futuristic, specifically at the time. You had like even the lady wearing the miniskirt was like, that was a big sort of, you wouldn't see that in female fashion at that time. It was a big no-no. So
it's ahead of its time, wasn't it? It was ahead of, it was,
So and that's the great beauty of it, was that the movie was actually ahead of its time in so many ways. And you probably wouldn't have appreciated it at the time. You probably would have watched it and thought this is a good movie. But in hindsight now, chronologically, we can look back and we can say, wow, that was really revolutionary what they tried to do in that movie in so many ways. For me, it was obvious. So that was my big immediate takeaway from the film, was like, wow, I thought it was shot in the 70s. I've seen movies I wrote this in my notes. I've seen movies made after the year 2000 that have worse CGI than that movie that was made back in the 50s. And it's a really good film for the way it looks and for what it's trying to present. I was really pleasantly surprised by that.
Awesome. Now, in terms of influences of the film, there is a kind of some Shakespearean influence. If you're into Shakespeare and you're into the Tempest Shakespeare story, or even if you're kind of generically into Shakespeare, there is a big influence of that. But then the other big influence, I'd say, really is Star Wars. Now, when I say influence of Star Wars, this is before Star Wars, but obviously from us looking back now, you kind of think, oh, this kind of aspects of this that kind of looks almost a little bit like Star Wars. So I guess in a way, I don't know if it would be fair to say that this film was the father of Star Wars, but I would imagine in some way it would have influenced George Lucas. And
it had
Would you agree with that?
It had to. You watch so many elements of this movie. There were so many scenes where I was just like, you can clearly see not only Star Wars, I was thinking of a load of movies that just started coming to my mind. And I was like, there are so many sci-fi movies that have taken little bits of influence from this one. You can just see it. It's all over the place, in a good way. Like, because of that attention to detail that I mentioned, when that happens, people who know film take notice, and it draws attention from people who have attention for detail, and they sort of soak this up like a sponge. It's just because you immerse yourself within the whole world, and it becomes something that Star Wars does very well, is the immersion of the universe. It pulls you in, and it makes you feel like you're a part of something that's really, it's not real. Like, that's the truth of it. It's not real, but it makes you feel like it is. And that's really what good cinema should do anyway. Any good story should draw you in. Watching Star Wars, what reminded me of Star Wars, it was the one scene in particular where Morbius takes the guys on a tour of his, I want to say his secret lair. It's not his secret lair. It's is it the Trill? I want to get this right. It's the Krill or the Trill's secret lair that they built underground. It's their home and whatever. he takes them on a tour of the grand tour of like the power station. And there's a moment where you're looking vertically down, almost from a bird's eye point of view, down at the three of them walking across a platform. And beneath this sort of walkway, there's almost an endless pit of, I don't know what to call it, just a building.
It's the architecture, isn't it, of the place? It's the architecture of the place. Yeah.
It's the power core. And it gives you scale to just how incredibly big and powerful this place is. And they're very
so hang on, do you know what you're saying? Do you know what you're saying with the Star Wars one? That's a really good point you're saying there, because I think the one that you're talking about with Luke's fate, obviously that's the Empire Strikes Back, where Luke's fighting against Vader. Obviously a very iconic lightsaber battle, one of the biggest movie scenes of all time.
Yep.
And it's Cloud City, so is it Bespin? I think that is the location they're at. Cloud City, obviously the Lando Calrissian, and they've gone there to get help and whatnot, and to kind of refuel and kind of set off again. Really, but the sort of, once again, this sort of iconic architecture and visuals. And yes, Forbidden Planet has that. It really strong on that, of giving like you say, this kind of the scale and making the place look huge. Like it gives you a sort of like, there's a culture here. There's a history to whoever built this.
Yeah,
they must be an amazing race, or whoever they are, because look at what they've built.
And I think that goes into the deeper narrative. This is what I took from it, but I mentioned about the insignificance when you see scenes that are shot really far back like that, and you see the scale of everything around them, and the actors look almost ant-like. To me, what that's saying is that there are things within the world that are bigger than yourself that you will never know, because you are so, not insignificant, but we're so small on this, on our own planet, that we often don't see the bigger picture, because we're focused on the platform that we're on and where we're at and where we're walking. And I think a lot of movies, especially sci-fi movies, they really play into that idea that we are small, insignificant creatures compared to this whole, to this bigger universe that exists. And
the cosmos.
Without those scenes, you don't really get that perspective, because the only other scenes that you're watching are close-up shots of the actors. So you're right there with them in their story. So you're focusing on this tiny narrative. But those bigger shots, what they do is they present us the opportunity to look at the bigger picture and to start wondering more about this awesomeness of the universe and what is out there beyond our own lives. And all of this is happening while they're having their little day-to-day conversation down there as little ants. And I personally love that wider perspective, because there are spiritual connotations to that. There are a lot of spiritual elements of, obviously, God, being omnipresent, being able to see everything, but yet is part of the detail, but is also can see the bigger, vaguer picture as well. He has that scope that we don't have as human beings. It's hard for us to see the wider picture when we're making our day-to-day decisions, like what breakfast cereal should I have today? Like, there's scope and there's space, and that spatial awareness for me in film is always a fantastic thing to be able to sort of think about. It just makes my brain move, and I start thinking about wider things in those sort of scenes. And I don't know whether it's intentional. I hope it is, because that's what happened for me. So those sort of shots are everywhere in sci-fi. You will always see these vast wilderness shots, because they're trying to help you understand the extent of your inferiority as a human in the bigger picture. I watched Space Odyssey 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Oh, what a classic film.
Literally a couple of days after you got in touch with me, just because I was like, I've never seen that movie, and it was a movie to watch before you die kind of thing. And I just wanted to see it. And same thing, I saw the amount of shots at the beginning of that movie and all the way through it of just insignificant small things moving in this vast, enormous space and vacuum. It was everywhere in the movie, and I felt bored. But when I recollected on it, I realized that actually the reason this director's doing this is because he's forcing you to think. He's forcing you to think about what's happening, and he's giving you the opportunity and the space to do so by giving you these epic shots where nothing's really happening. So while I felt bored at times during the Space Odyssey, I actually really appreciated those moments because I realized I was thinking during that time, and I was actually beginning to wonder about grander things than just the story, which is exactly what I hope they were trying to make me do.
Brilliant. Now, in Forbidden Planet, it's not, and we did mention Star Wars. Obviously, Star Wars has a lot of action sequences.
Yeah.
Kind of X-wings flying through space at high speed, and hyperspeed and whatnot. But Forbidden Planet doesn't really have that. But it does have a kind of moment. There are some scenes in the film where the action does ramp up. Now, obviously, we're not going to fully give that away because we want our podcast audience. We want you guys to watch the film. But what did you make of the action? What did you make of the action in a non-spoiler sort of way?
Yeah, well, it's like, here's the thing. This is where the comparisons to Shakespeare come in, because you've got this really foreboding, slow burn story going on, and it's moving fast enough that you can keep up with it. So it's not, this movie wasn't boring in any way. You could follow it. The dialogue was, I actually really loved the dialogue. I thought it was really well written script. There was always something interesting being said. There wasn't any waffle. Every time there was a scene, there was a purpose to it. And I imagine because they probably couldn't afford the waffle that someone like Zack Snyder likes to put in to his movies.
Oh, poor Zack.
But like, there was,
he's not your friend.
No, everything meant something. And that works for me because it means that I'm following the narrative, and I know that if I miss something, I'm missing the movie. And I'll give you an example. I wanted to go and make a drink at the time during the movie, and I was like, I can't do that because if I go, I'm going to miss something that's probably important in terms of the dialogue and what's being said, and I don't want to miss any important information. And I think that with Shakespeare in particular, everything that was said in the dialogue is meaningful. Everything that Shakespeare wrote down had some sort of role to play in the wider narrative. And so even when there are like jokes or he's being sarcastic and there's these weird moments of humor that Shakespeare's work has, it all fits the narrative. It all plays a part and a role in the story that he's trying to tell. So if you miss it or if you don't pay attention, then you don't get the full experience of the context of the world that you're in. And this movie did that really well in terms of telling a story. And it was I've put it down as a sci-fi thriller because I saw it as more of a psychological adventure. Because there are actions and adventure movies, blah blah blah, but a thriller is essentially an action and adventure movie of the mind. Like the idea is to get your brain moving and the gears ticking over. It's trying to get you to follow along on a different level. So while there wasn't the fight scenes of a Star Wars movie, intellectually this movie grabbed your attention a lot more than a Star Wars movie. A Star Wars movie was something you could just watch. You could sit back, watch it. You could almost watch a movie like that without the dialogue. I'm not suggesting you do that, but you could, because you can watch the fight scenes carry the narrative, right? With a movie like this, the dialogue is carrying the story, so it's really important that you're actually watching and listening to what's said. With that said, when there is action, I thought, it was usually done with animation, and I found this out through watching a documentary on it. They hired the guy they hired Disney's top animator at the time to come and work on the movie. And Disney's top animator is the guy behind all of the effects that you see in this movie, and it looks absolutely fantastic. I've seen Star Trek, the original with Shatner and Spock, and the graphics in this movie from the 1950s is better than anything I saw in Star Trek in the 70s and 80s. That's how good this guy does. And it's all because they hired this great guy from Disney, which was incredible that Disney allowed this guy he was borrowed. They didn't actually hire him. They essentially rented his expertise and skills just for this movie.
Interesting.
And it shows, because he does a great job and it looks fantastic. And that
brilliant
carried the bits of action that we see in the movie are all carried because of the brilliance of the CGI. I just love it for what it is, for the time and the context of when it was made. I thought it really carried those scenes brilliantly, and there were enough action scenes in it to keep you interested if you're not a dialogue fan. I think most movies overly rely on action sequences. This one didn't. It relied on the script, but it did add action into it, and they were always very on the edge of your seat moments when they happened. Like, there's the banging of the door when it breaks through the vaults and gets into the lair or the secret HQ, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, but we won't go into that now.
Well, I'm not telling you when it happens in the story or what it is, but there's the breaking into the vault.
You got podcast audience, you've got that to look forward to.
There are just some great moments in there, and obviously,
What did you make of Leslie Nielsen as the captain? He was the captain, wasn't it? And he was the
dude. He didn't make any jokes.
I know.
What was
he
that
was
about?
Straight up.
He made no sexual innuendos. There were no low-level racial slur jokes going on. This was not the Leslie Nielsen I grew up with.
It was more family
he was
friendly.
Like a decent actor. He's actually a really good actor. He did a great job. He didn't look anything like he does as an old man with white hair, but he's a really handsome guy as a young man. I thought he was great. That's the truth of it. I was really pleasantly surprised to see him in something serious and acting in a drama role rather than his slapstick stuff where it's, I love Airplane as a movie, but I appreciated him in this in a completely different way. My respect for him went through the roof because I always thought he was I thought he was a comedian. Most of my life, I just thought he was a comedian on my own ignorance for not checking. But watching this movie, I was like, okay, he actually can act. He actually did real serious acting. And I thought he was great. There's obviously a love story that goes through this as well.
Of course,
as Shakespeare and most sci-fi movies try and include at some point. And I thought he developed that relationship well. I thought there were moments that were a little bit weird, but it was down to the technology of the time more than anything. Like, the woman was like, this isn't giving anything in the story away. The woman's meant to be swimming naked, and there was this awful shot where she's clearly wearing like a nude colored dress, and she gets out of the water, and it's like, why didn't they cut that before she got out of the water? Because it was just so obvious she's fully clothed when they were trying to suggest that she was innocently swimming naked in the swimming pool or the pool.
Yeah.
So there were moments like that where in context of the time, you get it and you understand why they would have made certain choices. And I think Nielsen, to me, didn't do the romance as well as the drama. That was the surprise for me, because he's always the slapstick comedian, but he's usually in a romance story when he's in these comedy roles. Right. When he's in Naked Gun, there's always the woman that he's with or trying to be with that is being told as part of the story. But then when you saw this movie where it required more seriousness, that I guess if I'm going to criticize it, that would be where I feel he fell short, was that I didn't fully believe that he really liked her, or I think that was badly written, actually, that part of the story. And I think they probably wrote it in after, because most stories need some sort of romantic relationship in order to ultimately reach a female audience, without trying to sound sexist here. At that time, especially in cinema back in the 50s, it was very well known that women weren't going to go and watch movies as much. And when they did, it would usually be with their husbands or boyfriends on a date night at like an outdoor cinema, especially in America. I'm talking more
Movieplex.
Yeah. So for that scenario to work and to interest the woman to go and see this, they would need that romantic interest. And without it, it would just feel very much like a macho, very male dominated movie. And of course that was par for the course at the time, because we're talking about the 50s here, where gender roles were completely different to what they are today. But like I said, I thought that the lady who played the role, I didn't really like. She was eye candy rather than giving it any kind of substance.
She wasn't a very well-rounded character. Like you say, she visually looked amazing, and you can understand where they were going from the visual point of view, but there wasn't much gravitas or verve to her character in that respect.
And her relationship with her dad, like, I'm not going to go into that too much, but like, that was a very grounded story of a guy trying to be with a girl, and the girl clearly having very quick and deep feelings for the guy, and then the dad being caught in the middle of this relationship where he's kind of like, I don't want you going near this person, and being very protective. I don't think they went deep enough into that relationship. I think they tried to, but they did it on such a shallow level that it didn't really come across well. So the romance part of it was something that I was like, this story probably didn't need, but I understand why they had to throw it in. That was the negative, I guess, of the story for me, because it was just like, this is a throwaway addition to the whole thing, whereas I'm more interested in what's actually going on in the wider story and what's going on with the Trills. And I had loads of questions, like the guy went to the planet, Morbius goes to the planet, why is he there?